Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to tackle the weighty subject of calorie balance. And again, I'm going to start out by telling you a story. I've been a registered dietitian for almost 30 years, and I never thought I would see a man as large as Alan. Alan was referred to me as a homebound 25-year-old that was literally laying in bed. When my graduate students and I went to see him, I asked him what he thought he weighed, and he thought his weight was in the 800s. Well, it wasn't in the 800s. When we finally got him to a scale, it was 1,065 pounds. Now keep in mind, Alan couldn't get out of bed, and so someone was bringing him the food. And the amount of food he was eating was obviously large, but I don't think that he or his mother or sister who brought him the food ever thought he was eating an excessive amount of calories. And in reality, Alan was eating about 10,000 of calories every single day, and with absolutely no physical activity, his weight continued to skyrocket. So I think the challenge is when we look at what's happening to our culture, we have to step back and say it's all about the calories. Calorie intake has gradually increased over the past 50 years. And despite popular diets claiming the benefits of low carbohydrate, high protein, low fat, or glycemic index, we oftentimes look for the icing on the cake rather than getting to the actual cake itself. And the cake here is calorie balance rules the day. Unfortunately, we have increasing portion sizes, and this is evidenced by just the example of a muffin. A muffin in any kind of diet book is going to be listed at about 180 calories. Well, the next time you go to the grocery store, I want you to see if you can actually find a muffin, average size muffin, that's 180 calories. Some of the popular muffins may be as much as 440. So if you look up your portion sizes online or you're looking it up in a calorie book, you may step out and say, okay, well, I'm only eating 180 calories in a muffin. The problem is that's a standard muffin, and in this day and age, that standard muffin really doesn't exist. So with increasing portion sizes and decreasing physical activity, weight gain is inevitable. Here's a little fact for you. If you need 2,000 calories a day, that's your average intake. If you need 2,000 calories a day, if you eat only 100 calories a day more, that's it, 100 calories a day more, you're going to gain 10 pounds every single year. So the challenge is that small increase in portion size that you think is insignificant in terms of a lifetime becomes a very significant factor in terms of weight gain. Okay? Despite our societal focus on calories, which I'm going to contend most people don't count very well, a basic understanding of metabolism can actually provide a foundation for developing lifelong strategies for either managing weight, losing weight, or hopefully preventing weight gain. Now, in order to understand all of this, you might need a paper and pencil. I'm going to refer you to the guidebook more than one time because we actually have to take a look at how many calories you require per day, and then how do you burn those calories. And total calories are determined based on a number of factors. And first and foremost is basal metabolic rate. Now, what is that? Basal metabolic rate is the amount of calories that you need if you laid flat in your bed, you're awake, but you just looked up at the ceiling all day. That's all you did. Now, certainly factors that influence this are going to be gender, age, and muscle mass. And certainly exercise are also going to contribute to the total amount of calories that you need per day. But it's going to be that basal metabolic rate that we're going to focus in on. Also, there's something called voluntary movement. It's not exercise, it's just the fidgeting. So when I'm standing up here walking from side to side, this is not really physical activity, but it's voluntary movement. Sometimes this is called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and that's abbreviated NEAT, and we'll cover that more in a little bit more detail later. So basal metabolic rate is the number of calories that you need at rest for those functions that are not under your voluntary control. Now, what are those? Well, this involuntary calorie burning includes your heart rate, digestion, respiration, maintenance of blood pressure, and body temperature. If I'm in a room that's 70 degrees, for example, the amount of heat that I produce to keep my body at 98.6 requires energy. For me to digest my food, to breathe in and out, these are all things that I don't voluntarily control, but actually take a significant amount of calories. Basal metabolic rate is responsible in most of us, now there are going to be other factors that influence this, for approximately 60 to 75% of the calories you need per day. So if that's significant, what determines your basal metabolic rate? Well, it is your muscle mass. And I'm going to tell you this is really a pretty significant piece, because we can talk in detail about how do you influence your muscle mass. Men have a higher basal metabolic rate than women. Well, why is that the case? Men, under the influence of testosterone, have more lean mass or more muscle mass than women do. And the challenge for all of us as we age, we lose about 3% of our muscle mass per decade, and this is known as sarcopenia. Sarcopenia contributes to a poorer quality of life as we age and increases the tendency to add body fat. So I want you to think about this. You have a very busy job. You are busy. You're going all day long. You have a desk job. You're working at a computer. Or let's say, for example, you're retired and you enjoy reading magazines and you enjoy just kind of leisure activity. As you age, you are losing that functional lean mass. And when you lose that lean mass, you are lowering your metabolic rate. So what that means is the older that we get, without physical activity, we are atrophying, we're losing that functional lean mass. So I'm going to give you a great example, probably the best example I can give you. I was working with a woman who was 5'6" and 118 pounds. And most of you, if you're thinking 5'6" and 118, she's pretty lean. Well, I'm going to tell you she wasn't lean. She was what I described as a skinny, fat woman. How could she be fat at 5'6" and 118? Well, we actually did her body composition where we could measure the amount of lean mass that she had, and she was 40% body fat. 5'6", 118, 40% body fat. Well, how did I know that? How did I suspect that? Well, I saw her trying to get out of a chair. So the social function. I saw her trying to get out of a chair, and she had to rock. She had to use momentum to get herself out of the chair. Why? Because she'd had significant loss of functional lean mass. She might have worn a size 6, but she was clinically obese. Certainly in medical terms, what we're seeing now is individuals that are considered normal weight, my example, normal weight, but metabolically obese. How did that happen to her? All she did her entire life was diet. That was it. She went on one weight reduction plan over another. And so I think the challenge for her was, I need to change what I'm doing. I'm going to need to change my pattern of looking at my health and wellness. Well, this preservation of lean muscle mass and the prevention of body fat gain has prompted the American College of Sports Medicine to launch their recent campaign, Exercise is Medicine. This promotes not only aerobic exercise, walking, jogging, playing golf, but also strength training as well. So if you in your own exercise program are only focusing in on aerobic exercise does not promote lean mass gains the same way as strength training. Well, one of the biggest questions I always get with this is, you know what? I'm a woman. I don't want to look like a football player. I don't want to get big and bulky. And let me tell you, in the real world, it is hard to get big and bulky. And for women, you don't have enough testosterone to add that kind of lean mass where you're going to look like a man. So unfortunately, it's the misinformation that we have on the functions of activity that really make it a challenge for most women to embrace strength training. The other thing is, we don't know necessarily how to do this. So this might be a great opportunity for you to go into a gym, hire someone to teach you how to weight lift so you can get the maximum benefits. So that sarcopenia, that loss of functional lean mass, is not a normal consequence of aging. It is not physiologically normal. It is a consequence, and I mean a consequence, of us sitting at a desk, doing really nothing, being busy. But please, please don't confuse being busy. Don't confuse being busy with physical activity. Now, another source of calorie burning is something called the thermic effect of food. And what this means is it takes calories to actually digest your food? Well, the thermic effect of food, if you look in the science, depends on the foods that you eat. And the magnitude of this is that it's about 10 to 30% of your total energy expenditure. So, for example, if you eat a meal that's pure protein, it's going to give you a thermic effect of food of about 25% of the meal's total calories. 25%. But I want you to think about this in practical terms. Are there very many occasions where you're only eating protein? Well, maybe if you're on a low carbohydrate diet, you might. But the reality is that's not practical for most of us. So what can we do practically to increase the amount of calories that we need to digest and burn the calories that are in the meal? Well, certainly exercise can augment or really kind of facilitate this dietary-induced thermogenesis. One study showed that if we fed volunteers an additional 1,000 calories, it increased the thermic effect of food, increased the calorie burning by 28%. But if you exercised, it increased it to 56% of the basal requirement when subjects exercise after eating the meal. So the point would be, if you're going to really enhance that thermic effect of food, exercise is going to help you to do that. With the exception of people who are obese, encouraging moderate exercise closely following a meal is going to help to increase that thermic effect of food. So the goal would be you eat a meal and you go out and exercise, and that's going to enhance that thermic effect of food. Now, certainly, oftentimes that's not terribly practical. If you've gone and had a very large meal, you might not feel like going out and jogging. But the goal would be that you want to try and at least go for a walk maybe after a meal. In the old days, our mothers used to tell us, don't go swimming after eating. Well, the challenge is that that may not be a good idea from a practical standpoint if you don't have water close by, but the goal would be, can I get you to do something after eating? Instead of laying down, go do something. Now, the challenge is, how many calories do we require? And this, again, we're going to take a look at that total energy intake. So if you're going to say, okay, I understand my basal metabolic rate, I understand the thermic effect of food, I now have to be able to put together this package of total energy intake. Well, total energy intake is determined by the number of calories you take in, composed of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Your total energy expenditure is determined by your basal metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, and your physical activity. So as a reminder, basal metabolic rate accounts for 60 to 75% of your total energy expenditure. Thermic effect of food accounts for anywhere between 10 and 30%. And physical activity accounts for the remaining 15 to 30%. Okay, I'm going to refer you back to that guidebook. We're going to have some worksheets for you so you can estimate your own calorie intake. Formula to estimate your basal energy expenditure. Well, first you have to calculate your ideal body weight. This is not a real fun experience for most of us. So you're going to say, well, this doesn't apply to me. I have big bones, or I'm more muscular than the average person. So I understand your concerns, but I'm still going to give you the equation. And this equation is called the Hamwi equation. How do you figure out your ideal body weight? Okay, well, I'm 5'4". And if I'm going to figure out my ideal body weight, I would allow 100 pounds for the first 5 feet of height and 5 pounds for each inch after. So if I'm doing the math, 5'4", 100 pounds for the first 5 feet of height, 5 pounds for those 4 inches above 5 feet that I am, and so my ideal body weight would be 120. Now, I might not like that number. I might say, oh, no, I'm more muscular than that, but we're going to use that in terms of figuring out your calories. Okay? So what I can use this equation for, what this is actually predicting, this ideal body weight, is I can take my ideal body weight, 120, times 10, and that will give me the calories I need for my basal metabolic rate. Okay? 5'4", I'm 120 pounds is my ideal body weight, times 10 is my calories for my BMR are 1,200. So what that means is if I'm laying flat in the bed, doing nothing, I'm going to need 1,200 calories just to support that involuntary activity. So if I need to be on a weight reduction diet, my calorie level is going to be 1,200 calories. So oftentimes what I hear is that someone goes on a latest and greatest fad diet, And when you actually add up the calories on that diet, for me as an example, it may be 1,000 calories on that weight reduction diet. And you know what? That's too low. My calories for my BMR are 1,200. If I go much below that, I'm going to have a significant loss of lean mass. Now, certainly there are going to be examples for men, and we can take a look at our guidebook for more information. But for example, if a man is 5'10", he gets 106 pounds for the first 5 feet of height and 6 pounds for each inch after. So he would need for his BMR about 1,660. Now keep in mind these are estimates, plus or minus. Another way that what we have to add back into this is how many calories are we getting through purposeful activity? And how many calories are we getting through NEAT? Well, NEAT may be, remember NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. NEAT may actually be the hidden factor in resistant weight gain. What this means is that for people who are always constantly in motion, I can think of my daughter never being able to keep her legs still when she sat in a chair. She would wiggle that back from side to side. So this activity may actually be the secret weapon in terms of total weight management. An overfeeding study at the Mayo Clinic indicated that those participants who could effectively activate NEAT gained less weight when they were overfed 1,000 calories per day than people who were not. So this might also explain individuals who you know someone like this who can eat whatever they want and not gain weight. Well, it may be that constant motion, that fidgeting, the fact that they're maintaining posture better, all of these things, and not gain weight. We also know that people who are obese, when they are sedentary, they are really sedentary. They're motionless. They sit in a chair. There really is no activity associated with that. So I think the challenge is for those individuals, getting up and moving, simple things like, and when you're talking on the phone, stand, getting some more movement throughout the day, not really exercise, but more movement throughout the day may actually help to solve that weight management strategy. So again, if you're sitting at a computer all day long, if you're someone who likes to sit and read, set a timer in your kitchen, get up and move every 10 to 15 minutes, and that can be a real advantageous strategy in the long run. Now, the calories burned during physical activity can be significant in the case of a training athlete, or less than anticipated in the case of someone who has a sedentary job. Now, I will tell you in my clinical life, because I work with football players, I have individuals who can eat significant amounts of food and never gain weight. The best example I can give you, though, of the calories burned in physical activity and the whole calorie balance equation is I was working with a Rice athlete. He was a cross-country athlete, and he was 6'2" and 150. So I'm going to say this guy was relatively lean. He was also an engineering student, and so he came to me and figured out his calorie needs, and he estimated he needed 5,500 calories. Well, he was already eating 5,500 calories. And so what I couldn't capture, and what's difficult to capture, is those calories from NEAT. So I said, well, you're already correct in terms of your calculations. Your calculations are correct, but your calculations don't match your weight. So we started pushing up by 500 calories every 3 or 4 days. By the time we got him to actually gaining weight, he was eating 8,500 calories a day. Now, I have to tell you, that's more than I can eat in about 4 days, and that was significantly more than you would ever anticipate by these calorie calculations. The secret with him was that when he studied his engineering, he paced. He paced. He would recite equations in his head. He would look at formulas in his head, and that was just one of the ways that he learned best. So what was going on with him is, yes, he had purposeful exercise that he was trying to account for in his equation. And yes, he had appropriately estimated his amount of calories burned from BMR. But what he forgot to figure into this was the calories from NEAT. And so I think that's the challenge. Now, I will also tell you, when it comes to calorie balance, most people out-eat their exercise. They out-eat their exercise. I live in Houston. It's unbelievably hot and humid in Houston. And so people believe when they sweat, somehow they burn significantly more calories than if they haven't. Well, I can tell you, I can walk outside in Houston and start sweating within the first about 5 minutes that I'm out the door with no real activity. But there are many methods of estimating calories expended in exercise, but in general, it's 100 calories per mile or 100 calories per 2,000 steps. Okay, so you go out and take a walk, you go walk your dog, and you've walked 3 miles. How many calories have you actually burned? Around 300. If you go and eat a large chocolate chip cookie, that's 450 calories. You out-ate your exercise. And so when folks are trying to manage their weight, I will tell them, really don't account for the amount of calories that you're taking in average physical activity. Don't try and compensate for those because, again, you can very easily out-eat your exercise. So most public health agencies will recommend that you get 10,000 steps per day. Well, there's about 2,000 steps per mile. So in a 10,000 step day, you might have burned an additional, 500 calories. So I think the challenge is for most of us, because we have sedentary lifestyles, when we walk or exercise, we really overestimate the value of that. So how do I add exercise into my caloric needs? Okay. Exercise and movement can be quantified by adding about 30% to your basal for someone who is sedentary. Well, let's define sedentary. Sedentary would mean that other than activities of daily living, you're really not going out and walking, you're really not doing anything that's purposeful activity. And so what you get to do is you get to add only 30% to your basal. So remember, if I'm 5'4", my ideal body weight's 120 pounds, my basal energy needs are 1,200, so I can add about 30% to that. So my average calorie need would be between maybe 1,500 and 1,600 calories. I have to tell you that really is not a lot of food in today's environment. If I'm unbelievably active, and by active I mean that I have a physically active job, that maybe I'm a waitress or I'm doing yard work, and I go out and get purposeful exercise. Well, I'm going to tell you very few Americans fall into that category. But if that is you, if you are just going all day long and you're really physically active, you could essentially double your BMR calories. So if that was me, I could take my ideal body weight, 120, 1,200 calories for my BMR, and now double that to 2,400 calories for someone who is active. But most of us are going to sit in the middle of the road. And in the middle of the road is people who are moderately active. You may have a desk job, but you're going out and getting regular activity. You may like to read during the day, work around your home, but you're still going out and getting some exercise. So for those folks, you get to add about 50% to your basal energy needs. So again, if that's me, basal energy requirements are 1,200 calories plus about 50%, that would mean I get about 1,800 calories. Now, oftentimes people will ask, what's the best activity? What's the best calorie burning activity? And my recommendation is going to be as follows. Do an activity that you enjoy. Don't do something because you read in a book that it says it burns calories. If I can't run, or more importantly, I don't like to run, then I'm not going to be able to sustain that. But if I actually love working in my garden, and that is so enjoyable for me, then that's going to be a type of activity that I'm going to be able to sustain. So pick something that you enjoy. Again, if you love golf, try and play golf more often. You're going to look forward to that as an enjoyable activity. So keep in mind that the best activity is going to be the one that you enjoy. The benefits of regular exercise far exceed controlling weight. And the biggest benefit is for the people who are actually doing nothing. So if you are actually doing nothing, you get the greatest blood pressure lowering effect, for example, from going from being sedentary to something. So that should be motivation to you, that you think, okay, I'm really not that active and I really do want to control my weight. So what I'm going to do is go and start something, and I'm going to work on sustaining that. I'm also going to remind you that the activities that I just described, the walking, the golfing, the gardening, are all aerobic activities. You still are going to need to lift weights somewhere along the way to maintain that functional lean mass. I want to maintain as much muscle mass as I can. Also, to lose weight, it takes 3,500 calories to lose a pound of body fat. Oh my. If you have to consider 100 calories per mile To lose 1 pound of body fat, you have to walk 35 miles. 35 miles. And I think the challenge for all of us is, am I going to be able to sustain that activity? Am I going to be able to enjoy that activity? And can I make it consistent? I'm pretty fond of saying your body remembers what you do most of the time. And if most of the time you exercise, if most of the time you're going to the gym, the vacations from exercise, the vacations from a weight management plan are perfectly okay. The goal would be, can you sustain it? Well, putting this all together, putting all this math together can be a little complicated. So again, we're going to have this for you in the guidebook where you can actually refer to that and calculate your own energy needs. Now, the frequently asked questions. Can I rev up my basal energy needs? And the answer is, yeah, you can. First and foremost, the more functional lean mass you add, the higher your basal metabolic rate. So for example, I've been fortunate enough to work for the Houston Texans for the last 7 years. And I've weight trained all my life, and I really thought I knew what I was doing. Well, in reality, when I got with our strength coach, I didn't know as much as I thought. And so he helped me to gain 7 pounds of functional lean mass. Now, keep in mind, that translated into 7 pounds on the scale, but scale weight and muscle mass are not the same thing. My metabolic rate that I've already told you was 1,200 calories. From adding that functional lean mass, my BMR calories are now, measured BMR calories are 1,600. So that means every single day by gaining that 7 pounds of muscle mass, I get to eat 400 more calories. Well, you know what? I'm really pretty excited about that because now I get to eat more. So yes, you can rev up your BMR. Yes, you can do that, but the way you do it is by adding functional lean mass. I actually have a great picture of when my daughter was in college, and I had all the men on the weight training equipment and all the women were doing aerobic work. And I'm going to say we probably need to shift and have both men and women on both sides of that exercise room. Now the Hamwi equation is for adults. What about standards for children? Interestingly enough, children per pound of body weight actually require more energy than an adult. So the highest calorie needs are actually in infancy, because babies do what? In the first year of life, they essentially triple their birth weight. So they have a much higher calorie need. So the challenge is, if you have an overweight child, you can't use the same kind of calorie calculations. And honestly, your best advice is going to come from your pediatrician. And certainly, again, that other frequently asked question, what are the best calorie burning exercises? And I'll say, repeat after me, the best ones are going to be the ones that you enjoy, that you love, that you are passionate about. Now, what about someone who is wheelchair bound or someone on crutches? What do they do to stay fit? And this is where my friends in physical therapy really can come in. You can get exercise programs designed for your level of fitness or your level of functionality and really be able to do something. So for example, if I am wheelchair bound, but I can lift weights, I can do bicep curls, I can actually do something with my arms, that may be a strategy to help you to hang on to that functional lean mass. So there are ways that you can get to increasing your lean mass and not moving out of the chair. So the challenge for all of us is always going to be, how do I stay lean? How do I stay fit? And that calorie equation, basal metabolic rate plus the calories that you burn in exercise plus those voluntary calories of just movement, sum up that calorie equation. So the next time you're tempted to buy into the next supplement or pill on the market that is actually going to promise you diet in a pill, beware. The best strategies are managing energy intake in and calorie output out. Thank you very much.